Should we stop laughing now? Okay, well, welcome everybody for coming. Thank you for being here. I always love giving talks at STAR. You're such a warm and welcoming audience, and hopefully we'll have a nice opportunity to have dialogue. Stop me anytime. My name is Jennifer Taylor. I'm a therapeutic educational consultant in the Bay Area with, thankfully, clients all over the world who work with me to help them find residential or day therapeutic options for their students, their children, and today I'm going to talk about family systems and the impact of having a child with a disability. Family systems is how I ground my practice. Whenever I have a student referred to me, there's always collateral around that student that's feeling what's going on, even if it's not a crisis moment. I myself have a son who is on the spectrum, and so this family systems experience was something that's been very personal to me as well. So with that, I'm going to start off just with some slides that I have basically with themes. And again, I encourage you to talk through and with me about the themes as they come up. So first of all, I want you to know that as a parent, I'm going to guess all of you are parents of a student with some type of mental, physical, emotional disability that's requiring extra care. Yes, that's us? Okay. So you're working hard. You are working harder than the average parent. Not that an average parent exists, per se, but this is tough. This was not what was in the parenting books, even when the parenting books were not correct for any of us. You do have a heavier load than other families, and so right off the bat, I want you as parents to realize that this is a tough job, and it's a tough job just doing it as a family. Then you have your entire family system where you have siblings and cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents and everybody around you watching you have this dance, and then internally you have all this work that you're doing. So anyway, I wanted to start off recognizing that parenting isn't easy in general, and that when you are faced with a student who's got some extra challenges, it can be even harder, and you really deserve congratulations, and I want to start off with a positive about the hard work we're doing and that it pays off. Whoops, we don't need to have him bounce again. Come on. Okay. None of you are my families that I'm working with, so I can use this analogy because most of the families with whom I work and other talks I've given, I give my car analogy, which I have to give credit to a mom of a student that I worked with. It was her analogy. It's awesome. So when I talk about what it's like to have a family system, and I work with families just like yours, what I want to talk about is that there is this system, just like any other system, that's relying upon each other, that supports one another, that fights, gets along, has ups and downs, just like any other little system, but we all need to be there for one another, generally for the system to function. When you've got a student who's got a bit of a disability, a little dysregulation, emotional, academic, maybe physical, that rocks things a little bit. And so if there's a car crash, say for example, you've got a sibling who's got something really going on with them, and it kind of starts to really dysregulate the home. Maybe that's right when the diagnosis happens, or maybe teenagerhood when things change. No matter when it is, the person driving the car is who I would identify as the student, the person who has the disability. Sometimes in medicine it's called the IP, the identified patient. However, everybody in the family is in the car. So everybody in the family is feeling something. We don't know what, but somebody's got a bruise, somebody's got a scrape, somebody, had a bad experience that they're still feeling. And so what I want to impress upon what it's like to have, be in a family with a student who's got a disability is that everybody's having some kind of reaction and feeling about it. And it can waver in intensity day to day, it can waver in intensity year to year. And of course, it all depends on how you come as a hardwired person. Some parents roll easier than others. Some siblings are more easygoing than others. However, everybody's in the car. And so I want to point out that this is why I talk about what it's like to have a sibling with a disability, but also talk about that family system, because everybody's having that experience in some level. So trauma. I'm going to start off a little heavy and then we'll go light. But what is trauma? Trauma is something that you can't control that seems to be happening against your will. That's just kind of a general expression. The reason I bring up trauma is that there are big traumas that we would say, like you witness a car accident and someone dies, or you lose a spouse or a family member untimely. We can all think of what's a big trauma, right? Like it's what's on a movie or on, what are the crime shows, CSI, right? There's trauma. Then there are these little T's, these little tiny traumas that kind of happen maybe regularly throughout your life that build up anxiety. I would propose that any student or even adult child who has a mental, physical, or academic or cognitive disability feels these little T's their whole life. And so why do we have so many kids on the spectrum or with ADHD or name another disability, I don't know, Down syndrome, whatever. In the world that's not prepared for them or set up for them, every day is a tiny T. So they necessarily will have perhaps anxiety. Maybe they're going to be susceptible to depression. That's the student who's got that disability. Well, imagine you're the sibling of a child who has a disability, or the mom or the dad. It still was something we couldn't control, and we are also still maybe having these tiny little T's, maybe not as frequently, but it can create stress and confusion for everybody who's in the family. And so not that you necessarily need to have that heavy word like, it's a trauma, but neurologically, it's a traumatic experience. Your brain is experiencing something that is distressing and you can't control it. And that's something you have to reconcile. Or maybe not reconcile, but have an understanding about so that you can be proactive about how it feels to you and what it means. Children can personalize these discrepancies. So if I'm a sibling of a student or my brother or sister who's got a disability or some kind of learning difference, I might feel like there's something about me, or I might feel like maybe I have to be better because mom and dad are always so worried, or any other kind of small minor thing that happens in the family. We even know when there are divorces that one of the things many therapists and coaches and parent therapists would say, well, tell them it's not their fault. The same thing with the student with a disability. There's something there that can feel personal to both the child who is feeling that disability in the world and also their sibling. And then, of course, parents feel the ricochet of all of this dynamic. So there was one research study that I could find on the well sibling syndrome. It's pretty well written about, but in terms of like evidence-based, it's how a disability of a mental health issue affects a sibling. So obviously you've got the well sibling and the not well sibling, not necessarily the wording I would choose, but it is the scientific term that's being used now. The American Psychology Association in 2008 did a study. It was a pretty nice longitudinal study, 46 years of siblings of folks who had a mental illness, and they found that they are at much higher risk to experience depression. So disabled does affect you long term. The younger the time of the stress, the increase of the impact. So that we know neurologically, if kids have stress or trauma between the ages of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, it carries a higher load on them. It may not show up till later in years, but it's impacting them. Another example would be the stress that an infant in a foster home or an orphanage feels. Even if they're adopted by loving parents, they have this stress built up that sometimes carries on with them. Again, generalization, not going to happen to everybody, but still data and reasonable given what it's like. And I'm sure as parents you can all identify what there's a certain amount of stress and anxiety that comes in your home. In general, feelings of overlooked, pretending to see, needing less, getting less, living on the periphery can create loneliness. These are just realities of what it's like to be in the dynamic of a family system where somebody needs more. It could even be a parent in terms of this study. So that's the well sibling syndrome. It can feel a sense of parental grief and stress and have a desire to ease the family burden. So that well child might say, well, I got to make up for it. I need to do more, not be more of the problem, right? Carry the expectation of having to care for the sibling. How many of you feel like maybe that's going on in your family? Yeah. Yeah. Which? The feeling like they have to overcompensate? Yeah. I have that too. I have an 18-year-old son who's autistic and a 16-year-old son, and I've had said explicitly, this is not for you. This is mom and dad. And I just know intrinsically, like, he feels it. Like when my other son's not doing well, part of him is like, really? Like, come on, what an idiot. But I know deep down it's, holy crap, this kid really doesn't get it. And he's my brother, and I love him. So that can be carried around too, and that causes anxiety. And then, I know I experienced this with my younger son when they were both in middle school. You know, it's just part of growing up that you want to be with the cool kids. You know, you don't want to be pointed out as the one who's got the quirky brother or sister, right? Even as a parent, sometimes at the playground, you're like, yeah, that's me. That's my dysregulated kid that just threw sand in your face, you know? But when you're 9, 10, 11, 12, when you're in middle school, this is tough stuff. And so that can really be that internal conflict. I love my sibling, I love my sister, I love my brother, but geez, I don't know that. And then what's interesting, and somatic complaints are how we feel things in our body. So if I said, where do you feel stress? Some people might say, oh, I feel it here. A lot of people might say, oh, I feel it here, my back. So somatic complaints like stomach aches, headaches, maybe even being extra tired, can also be symptoms that the well child feels as a result of all this other stuff that's going on with them. So just some things to know about this syndrome called yeah.
I think it's so interesting as I'm thinking of this because my sister has Down syndrome. And so growing up as the oldest sisters that were in the brothers in between, I can still relate to some of these ideas. And then some of them I really can't. In an interesting way, I was always so proud that I would be the one that would take care of her. That was never placed on me, but I wanted to because I value her and I love her. But I also felt really embarrassed sometimes too. I have friends come into the house and she'd be doing, strange tricks or strange things.
Right.
And seeing my friends laugh or whatever, all of a sudden, it was such an interesting juxtaposition.
It is.
Feelings to have to deal with. Now I'm a parent. And now Jack, my oldest, who is a star, he's 10, and we tried earnestly for many, many years for him to have a sibling. He has a sibling now who's 6, so there's a 8-year difference. And one of the strongest desires I had as we were understanding that Jack acting first, as he was 5 or 6,
Yeah.
was that I was putting him to be a nice child who was super first. And so it's just interesting to hear about all of this and hear, okay, I was on one side, now I'm on the other side, and actually my expectation is that if Jack ever got into trouble, that Wes would be there, and vice versa.
Yep.
If Wes ever got into trouble, he'd and actually got to play that role in Big Brother very well.
That's great.
And so, I love how you actually, these are just blanket statements, these are just the majority, that it doesn't mean it necessarily will
Right.
happen or it won't. And I love that, and I also am just resonating with a lot of the things that I
Oh,
hear
thank you.
from the sibling side and now being in the parent side.
Right.
It's really interesting.
Oh, thank you. Anybody else have comments or questions about this? Yeah, go ahead.
And just like the optimism, and also wonder if there's some kind of systematic growth that there's disability.
We're going to get there. Glad you brought that up, because we're not going to end on this trauma, anxiety, stomach aches. We're going good places. Yeah.
I'm also curious at what age do siblings start to experience
So we know neurologically that kids pick up everything starting at birth. You know, that attachment theory on how a child actually relates to the world starts right away. So you guys all know a little bit about what attachment theory is. It's kind of how we learn to bond as a baby. There are different attachment styles, and most of us have some deficit in some area that we try to compensate and learn about as we grow up. So right off the bat.
So basically, when siblings older or younger, they're going to experience it immediately.
I think so. You know, my son was younger, and there's no doubt that he, once he was aware that he was in a tribe of people, could engage. In fact, so for months, he immediately became joking, because in order to get any kind of feedback was like big stuff and silly, crazy physical stuff. And so there was no doubt that he used that to get his brother out in a way that was age appropriate. So whether it's stressing him out, I don't know about that, because we all come into the world and our experiences are what form us. And so to him, that was kind of the normal thing, right? But as the profundity of symptoms and challenges that kids with disabilities face as they get older and bigger, no matter what it is, adults even, it becomes more stressful on the family system. I do think they pick up on our anxiety too. So if we're at the beginning of something and we're feeling like something's not right, I do feel like as a parent I was probably less huggy-feely with my second, because I was dealing with the new diagnosis of my first. So that just happens, right? I mean, that's just the way, I think we cope, we survive, yeah. Okay, so this is a cute little video of some girls with their sibling talking about what it's like to be them. It's about 7 minutes long, and I don't know, can I just push this and it'll go? No, that's a pointer. Do I have to do it manually? Okay. Neophyte. So this is a British National Health Service.
I think I have to go quite quickly, like the surface in a while. Nothing actually serious, but I think like that time after that was my mum, I was felt like I was never able to do with children, so I don't really sort of suicide or anything like that. And I think sometimes I just felt that little bit of a childhood. I think when I was younger, I felt like I had to, like, one day I didn't know I had to, I just felt like I had to, I think I've got to think about just how growing up with it, she understood it a lot more, so she kind of accepted it. It's a nice fascinating, because you go to the disabled children and sister in the UK. The main thing that affects those children are their parents are very, very busy, they have a disabled child, and lots of other things to do with, and they get their attention from them. They also find it very difficult to understand disability. One of my stories is that they do what they do, why they want to cope with other children, why they want to sit in a wheelchair, they want to learn how to solve those questions, and how we improve things and kind of how to, a lot of things like questions, and I found that really hard, and I felt like I was having a day where he was there, I was but everything he was saying, that was disabilities, especially our familiar with disabilities and families. Yeah, from this issue.
Yeah, because when that disabled thing, when I first start in assembly, some people had a kind of thing that they asked some questions, and I found it a bit difficult because some of them I didn't really know.
I didn't know the answer to the question.
No.
There are some difficult situations that all of us born with a disability have a disabled child. Because of the difficulties in hospital, you've got a unit system in the job, and a big station, and it's a very system, you may be very, let's say, content because the dog is having isolation. Just for the to be found, so found partners of next year. So if you really show what is having a fine collection on the website, it's like 2 operations. So some of them look like they're first long time. So when you're down on that and you have everybody experience concerns, you're experiencing to come out of hospital.
It's a bit difficult for me to start because I don't really feel one. Yeah. Especially if that's the one that really feels so disability. Feels like a sister.
People with children, so when they have their attention, there's a feeling that there's a lot of things like that, so it is a conflicting feeling for them. And as you're asking me, as I think it's happening, even though like, really time it was like, so specific, and it depends on, you do kind of feel a bit like, oh yeah, why I was, when I was going to be there or something, and you can't have you like, so when I started something, I just realised that there's a reason that we have siblings, and then you have to go into disabled kind of then it's to first. And one of the things we talk to parents about is making sure that siblings every day get a little bit doing something they want to do. Little action is that when maybe the students feel big chunk of time and considering support needs. Because children who are young need to feel very regular reassurance and contact with parents to know that they're special. So that was a bit of time is just for them.
Sometimes it's that I found the moment I was out with the sister. Sometimes, but sometimes it's
She's afraid to answer.
Maybe totally different from experience from difficult emotions. They're also been picking up on that emotional state, siblings absorb those feelings. One of the things we do really, really help siblings with that is for parents to talk to them about their feelings. I was started talking about things like that with my mum and dad. I spent out of chat with my lawyer, and that was only the part of how I got in. Parenting conferences, specific parenting sessions, supporting siblings over the phone, and particular issues, they don't have it, that's something that we can offer. We also encourage parents to contact the local healthcare professional or other professional working with their family to find out if they're able to bring their service attention.
It's like a disability club that you feel like you can talk to any time you want and you know that. And anytime you feel like you want to say stuff that you can't say heard, you just feel like you can put it better. You say after because you can now feel because I might feel it as well if they're feeling like I don't know.
I think I've had any event experiences like really really useful and I've got my 2-year-old who said 3 hours and going to really different schools disabled.
Once you do, I kind of realised I was so selfish about it and I started that me and I didn't realise that I just looked up that that was going to sound like so difficult and I left the open and everything. And when you said it, you realise
Siblings have particular issues that they need support with at different times throughout their childhood, and as parents and other professionals are able to give that support to siblings, and then siblings are able to have that positive experience of growing as their disabled brother or sister. After 2006, I started to appreciate this so much more when I realised that I was really what was happening to him and what was happening there or anything like that. It was just a things like that. and it helped me to know that I need such a great service.
Sometimes like it's like those are trying to still be still like don't realise.
Yeah, the things that you don't know,
Yeah.
it's in your something.
Yeah, so special to me. Don't know what else is special, so it's like selfies or family. Pretty cool too.
I thought that was really cute. Kind of covers what we were talking about in the first part. I will say I'm having a friend and colleague who runs SIB shops in Marin coming. I knew she was going to be late. She's just going to bring some information about the SIB shops that she runs, for those of you that may want to think about that. What do you guys think about that? I mean, that's a very profoundly disabled, maybe even like your sister? Yeah. But still the themes were there, right? That conflict, that inner conflict about loving them, but feeling awkward, and feeling left out, but knowing that your brother and sister need more from your parents. You know, like she was saying when and I know it was hard to hear sometimes with their accent that the mom was in the hospital for a bunch of surgeries, and you know how they missed her. You know, those are real feelings that you know are just part of having a child who needs that. We're going to be gone. We might be gone more. We might drag them to therapy. They might have to sit outside, you know, during occupational speech therapy or whatever. I think one of the things I want to make sure to touch on is that they did say how much talking about it helped them. There she is. We just actually had a video about SIB shops. So this is Allie. It's okay. Can you stay for the rest and then talk at the end? Okay. Is that, you know, the siblings had a place to talk about it. So if there isn't a SIB shop, and, you know, maybe even if you are talking to your child, and we'll get to how to do that in a bit, I think it's nice to have a safe space. So if you can find a local therapist, you know, even if it's once a month for them to check in and feel like they've got a safe space to kind of talk about it. It could take a while, but a really good place child therapist will be able to touch on some of they feel heard in the home. So I would be open and hearing to other thoughts you guys have about that.
What if you had two siblings that both have disabilities,
Mm-hmm.
but are differing in severity?
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend the same thing?
Yeah, I think so. I don't see, to me that's, I would just put that next to, you know, child A who has this function and child B who has this function, still the same thing. What might change is the cognitive ability to understand some of the content that we've talked about, and then that would be more of an expert question to somebody smarter than I am about how you actually express that to maybe the child who has the bigger disability, whatever that is. Anybody else have ideas on that?
No, but I'm going to say that my daughter did go to therapy.
Yeah.
I think it was primarily for anxiety and suicide, which is disease, right? Primarily for anxiety, but the woman is a kind of expert in job descriptions on that, and she was also from the special ed, and she, I don't know, she was just like a service therapist, she had all this great background, and so, but she did end up working with my daughter that on this kind of stuff.
Great.
I feel like she did it a lot of people
Mm-hmm. Play therapy and art therapy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, maybe we can share resources afterwards for those who might want to help with that. Okay, so we're moving on, and so now we're going to get to more fun stuff. Okay. So this was part of the video, but I wanted to make sure to talk about how do you nurture that parent-child relationship, especially for the child who doesn't have the disability. However, we were talking earlier, this applies to anybody. This applies to spouses, colleagues, best friends, probably not pets, but some of it will be. The one-on-one time definitely works with pets. So in the video, talk about create a safe environment and acknowledge feelings. So just being able to say, you know, and we'll talk a little bit about how to attune to your child's feelings. Again, they tend to personalize the discrepancy in the family, right? One-on-one time is definitely talked about in there. It is definitely a skill that I did, was to try to make sure to carve out time with my quote, non-disabled child. And as he got older, that included like a little spring break trip for 3 days where, you know, we really left. Luckily, I had a co-parent who was able to kind of pick that slack up. If you don't have that, you're going to have to just, you know, figure out how you carve those moments out. Practice attunement. I'm going to give a couple videos about what exactly that is, but attunement in general is how you hear and understand and honor somebody's feelings, even the tough ones. So sympathy is the ability to recognize and maybe share a feeling. Empathy is that I can understand how you're feeling, but it's not my feeling. So when you're in attunement, you can say to somebody who might be looking like this, gee, you know, I'm noticing your head is down and your eyes are on the floor and you're kind of hunched over, and I'm noticing maybe you're not feeling that well. You know, so automatically that person goes, wow, like you're seeing me and you're maybe experiencing what I'm feeling. So that's, you're attuning into how they're feeling, right? You can do the same thing with anger, sadness, grief, anything that someone's feeling. If they feel that you recognize it and you're tuning into their feeling, that brings you closer. So if you can practice that with your child, you can even do this, again, this works with spouses, best friends, parents, anybody that you really want to nurture a relationship with, attunement is one of the key ways to do it. Give education and information. Knowledge is power. So at the age-appropriate level, talk with your other child about what is going on with their brother or sister. What is it like to be them? Maybe even give them a book about what particular disability they have. Take them to a teacher or you know, a therapist or somebody who has a specialty in that particular disability, and have them have that kind of one-on-one conversation. The more they know, the less mysterious it is, the more power they'll feel about helping the situation, or at least acknowledging what it is they can't change. Fair and reasonable expectations of all children. So yes, you have a disability. Yes, you have to make your bed. Maybe you need more time. Okay, still an expectation. Yes, you're going to brush your teeth. Maybe you have an assistive device or you have a different way of brushing your teeth. Maybe mom needs to help you. Everybody brushes their teeth. Everybody, you know, turns the TV off when I say they turn it off. Whatever the values and the boundaries are in your home, they have to be equal. And that can sometimes be hard, right? Because there's a feeling there that your other child might need more, and already feels bad, right? But that just, that everybody in the car feels that. And reasonable expectations means, you know, you can't go overboard with what you're expecting of all your kids to do. And then be honest and open about your own experience. Again, age appropriate. Don't lay down on a 4-year-old, you know, oh, mommy just got home from work, I can't handle this, da, da, da. You know, like that amount of energy and emotion is not going to help. But at a moment where there is a calm conversation, or maybe at a family dinner, talking about all the things that we're trying to do in our world, especially as a parent, it's okay to tell you're not burdening your kids with the reality of what it's like to be you at that moment. It gives them a chance to attune and be empathetic to you. It's going to have a different way of doing this. I think it can be incredibly powerful to talk about your own feelings and your own experience. This happens a lot in my practice when parents and kids, and I have crisis kids where that relationship is completely fractured. When mom and dad start talking about their own experience in the relationship, the kid can start listening, and it evolves into a much more relational, warm experience for everybody. So again, these are generalities. They're not going to work for everybody, but these are my tips on how to increase that parent-child relationship, even if it is an only child. These things will work. Questions, comments? Okay, so now, before we get to the positives, we're going to talk about attunement. And I have two awesome videos that will help us with this. The first one is about, I think it's not Bobo. I always forget his name. These are from Inside Out. What? Bing Bong by Bobo Bing Bong. Sorry. So we're going to watch the video and then we'll kind of like debrief about it afterwards, and it'll be interesting to see your perspective. But both of these videos are about attunement, and they're both from Inside Out. It was a great movie about emotions and attunement and recognition of other people's life experiences. So. So, ideas on why that is attunement? Anyone? I think that's a really good one. So, when I first saw this, I felt like, well, that's what I would have done. Like, you're sad. I'm going to come try to make you happy. I'm gonna, yeah, cheer you up, man. And what he really needed was attunement. He needed somebody to get inside of where he was and sit down and feel it and connect with it. And so it's just a great example of what it means to attune to somebody who happens to be sad with comics. Makes it kind of stand out. But that's what I mean when you have an emotion in somebody, and to try to correct it or change it, or maybe not even recognize it, is to turn away from that relationship building opportunity. So again, if that's where you're wanting to go, if you're wanting to develop that deeper relationship, tune into what the feeling is, because you saw as soon as sadness acknowledged what it was feeling and asked him questions about, boy, that must be hard, all of a sudden he's like, yeah, okay. And he cried, and then he's better. Joy was like, ah! And that wasn't going to work. He needed somebody to feel and attune to what he was feeling and just connect with him in that way. So, any feedback on that?
it's an interesting thing.
Mhm.
Feel supported,
Mhm.
and also people are so afraid to let their guard down and
Mhm.
just say, but when I see that, I mean, oh, you know, I have that moment where
Right. So imagine a sibling of in your family where there's a disabled sibling, and you know, they're afraid to not let it down, and you can help them feel like, you know, it's okay. You know, I'm noticing that you're kind of bummed out tonight. Well, you know, and just be there, and just be in that, and not just be the cheerleader when things aren't going well, because that's not really where they need to go. Okay, then there's another one, and this is very particular to parent-child, and this has more graphics about what's going on in mom and dad's head, so maybe more relatable as a way to connect. And the reason I focus so much on attunement, because I think most of my talk tonight is about relationships and keeping things tender and close in a family that's got these little T traumas going on all the time. And so the more I can give you guys skills about what I think is going to help, the better. And so we'll have a couple more slides after this, and then we can talk more about it. But I find this to be incredibly helpful when I talk about attunement and relating to your children. I don't know if you guys remember this scene. So just check out the daughter's body language. It's a massive attunement challenge happening at this table. Relationship development. So, whoa! Ah! Stop. So there we have a lot of attunement trying to happen. And some, oh my God, sorry. There we go. Can play behind us, we don't care. So, you know, the daughter obviously needed more. You could see from her body language, even though it was really nice the way the parents were trying to connect, but tuning in a little bit more would have helped her feel like she could have been more comfortable. I don't fault those guys. I probably would have done the same thing. But then the mom and dad not being like, okay, like you're frustrated, I'm not catching that, I'm over here. So this I thought was really helpful to show how that parent-child disconnect can happen when there is that despair and that negative feeling, and trying to like, oh, I found the hockey team, isn't that great? And you know, she's clearly sitting there like, I don't even want to live in California, and now I had to go to this school and I live in this dumb house. One of the things you said struck me when you were talking earlier. I have a challenge in my own practice and in my own self when I have a family who says, well, I just want my son or daughter to be happy. I just, you know, I have a little thing on my application where your goals, I just want them to be happy. You know, honestly, I don't want them to be happy all the time. Happy is not a normal state. Okay is a good state, then we have happy and then we have sad, but nobody walks around happy all the time. So if that's our expectation, that we're gonna have happy kids all the time, that's just way too much. So I do like the idea, you know, that we can validate that there's a range of emotion and we can attune into that. And also, let your child see that in you. Teach them how to attune into you. And you can do that verbally, or you can do that, you know, in many different ways. You can do that by watching a silly cartoon and talking about, you know, how sadness was much more able to connect than joy. And doesn't it feel better when somebody can, like, who was it that said, maybe it was the video, or somebody else was talking about how you can talk to other people. Video, but like when you can connect with somebody who's having that same feeling. All right, so now we're on the downhill slide. Yeah.
Maybe not, but with disabilities oftentimes like secondary behaviors. And when
Yes.
a kiddo is exhibiting behaviors in general, just like on an escalated level of daily
Yep.
how would you suggest that parents and siblings navigate that? I know that's like a super broad question.
Yeah. Well, you just started humming my tune.
Okay.
So that's a really tough one.
Yeah.
That family needs probably some strong family system support and family therapy. I would definitely recommend, if it's a behavior, that a behaviorist come in and do some support on what is triggering that behavior. And then, you know, you've got the whole range of, you know, medication management, you know, maybe there's a physical challenge that's brought up, maybe they're adolescent and their hormones are raging, maybe they're nonverbal and they don't know how to get their needs met. So much can change. Maybe there's a new baby in the family, right? That tilts the scales, right? Maybe mommy and daddy get divorced. There are so many, it's a super broad question. You and I can talk later about all that goes into that, but attunement is is always gonna serve you, and one-on-one time with your child, you know, taking some of those stressors away. When you have escalating behaviors, it's usually an indication that there's a lot more going on and that what you have been doing and trying needs to be shaken up. And how that gets shaken up is why there are people like Allie and people like me and people like, you know, your counselors at STAR and all the resources that you have. So that's a good question. Sounds like you might be having that. And Allie can help us. Yeah.
Maybe just about something that I found was particularly in female, not there for me. One behavior, a couple behaviors that might be scary in the home and happen over and over. But having having relationships if you can, whether in their typical sibling, like maybe now that they have a place, maybe a door that they can go behind and walk, and that they know that they've got a safe place to be, seems to be at least a helpful thing where they are physically safe.
Yeah.
So that is something that we typically do recommend.
Yeah, I still live with kiddos, and I feel like, when the diagnosis is initial, and you're still trying to figure out, like, supports necessary, like, I think that's the biggest question that I get from families. Like, those experiencing intruders in the home, how do I manage this? And so that's why
Expert help. That's the point at which you really need to get those outside resources to address what's going on. Yeah, parents can't do it. We don't know. Even those of us who are therapists, or, well, I'm not one, but, even Allie would say, you don't have the same skill set for your own kids that you have for other people's kids. You just don't. So positives. Our siblings are way more resilient than a lot of other siblings who grow up in a much more neurotypical environment. Things just kind of happen, no problem, no mess, no fuss, and then they hit a wall in young adulthood or adulthood, and they're like, what just happened? Way more resilient. So that's a huge plus, and maybe you feel the same way about yourself. Coping skills, much better coping skills, especially if we as parents have started to model what it means to be able to handle a situation that's a little bit traumatic, out of control, unable to get a hold of it. Huge, huge benefit if we can get in there and teach them coping skills. Self-esteem, you saw some of those, one of the girls, she was feeling pretty proud of herself. She was the big sister, and then even the little sister was like, yeah, she's my special Sarah. There's a certain amount of self-esteem that comes from being able to survive and thrive and be proud of the dynamic change that goes on in your family, and especially as those siblings develop into adults, I think that's where this really comes in a lot. Now, it may waver. There are going to be struggles. I think, again, we talked about those middle school years, especially where kids tease and don't get it. But I think if you stick with it and you talk about it in your family and you work on those relationships and that one-on-one time, that's going to be a huge strength. Relational strength, that's kind of a no-brainer since half my talk has been about relations. Compassion, patience, tolerance, love. I mean, again, those skills, if you're not challenged at an early age, are harder to gain when you get older. I think we have, I know I'm not going to say that on camera. Advocacy, they're very good advocates. They know how to ask for things, whether it's for themselves or for their sibling. And then dependent on variables of inclusion, recognition of choice. So all of these things are, again, huge generalizations, but how included they are, how recognized they are, what the choices you've made in your family, all affect that. Yeah. So resiliency could be a positive, but maybe you haven't really talked about that in your family dynamic. So what I'm saying is all of these are kind of dependent upon the variables of the choices and the inclusion and the way your family has grown. Sorry, that is a little vague there at the bottom. It's my way of saying these are generalities, and, don't hold me to it. Sibling support. So I'll have Allie come up at the end and talk about her sib shops and about some of her practice. She's also a good networker, so if you ever want more resources or referrals, she knows a lot of people in the Bay Area. So sibling support, maintain individuation. They have their own life. Let them have their own life. Get a good therapist. Talked about that. Be with others, sib shops. They have to be able to talk about it. Not talking about it is just pushing it down, and it's going to come back up. It'll come back up in other maladaptive behaviors. It's just like anything that's going on that's traumatic. We cannot talk about it. It's going to stay underneath, and it's just going to be harder to work with as you get older. Timeout? How about grandparents, extended family? Some of you who may regional center support. Project, and then Sibling Leadership Network, which to online supports that will have ideas that could help. So really, I'm kind of concluding with a lot of the stuff that we've talked about all the last hour. And then one of my favorites always in all of my talks is self-care. If you are not filling up your own bucket, you have nothing to give. I know that's easy to say. I'm probably not the best person to practice it. However, when you feel depleted and short-tempered and teary and overwhelmed and tired, those are pretty good signs that you need at least half an hour for you, whatever that is. Take a nap, take a walk, read a book, whatever, go get a manicure. Have some time where what you are doing helps you. You will not be able to have the clarity, the attunement, the relational skills if you're depleted. I know it's hard. Try to find a way to do it, at least once a week or so. It's sometimes hard when you're the only one man in the ship, but maybe even half an hour after bedtime. I'm a big believer in your own therapy. I've probably had half a dozen therapists over the last 25 years for a variety of reasons, and I don't think I could be as confident and functioning and happy in the relationship I have with both of my children without somebody to bounce things off of, and also vent my own crap. Like, there are some days where it is poor me all day long, and all I just need is for somebody to let me cry and go like, this really isn't fair, I really hate it, I don't know what to do. I actually wrote an essay that was on NPR about, 10 years ago, and it was really, it wasn't a poor me thing, but it was a little bit, and it really was at a point where I'm like, please, I just want someone to be nice to me. Please, that's all, just smile at me at the playground, because I got nobody. And all of you people with the fancy, wonderful kids who are like playing, and it's really lonely. So I did write a little poor me essay. So you need to be able to figure that out, because you need to recognize your own trauma in this experience. It is something you can't control. It is something that feels bad. It isn't as big a trauma as somebody might recognize, but in your body and how you're experiencing it is physiologically and emotionally, it is a trauma. Don't be a hero. Again, find your support system, whatever it can be. Maybe it's church once a week. Book club, movie club, walking. I think I'm repeating myself here. And then exercise. It is really proven time and time again to be one of the best ways to handle depression, anxiety, feelings of self-confidence, self-worth. If there's anything you can do, half an hour a day to just do something where you are really working yourself up, the endorphins work, it really does work. And again, I'm not the best. I do what I say, not what I do. And then I run a parent support group, and we were talking one Sunday about self-care and radical self-care, and what does that mean? And so this is what my parents said. Some of them meditate, they read a funny book. I think I said watch a funny movie. I think laughter supercharges me. I think I started watching Deep again last night because I was feeling a little like I needed some irreverent humor. Walk with friends, exercise. Sometimes kickboxing is a good way to get some of that out. Supportive groups like tonight, and then what you might be able to develop in your community, in your school. Marriage counseling for those who are married, I highly recommend it. It's very difficult to co-parent when you have neurotypical kids, when you come in with your own sets of experiences, and then to throw in the mix of something else. It's not too early to just go touch base about how things are going. And then massage and music, two other good things to do. So those were from parents of mine. We were talking about self-care in one of our groups. And then you do have a community, especially in Marin. We have Matrix, there's CHAD, there's the Golden Gate Regional Center. For those older kids, Department of Rehabilitation. You have a ton of mental health professionals in Marin. Like, you can go to one building and there's 20 all in one building. Tutors, coaches, extended family, and even people like me at consultants. So you do have a community of people who are here to support you, who've been through it, who want to help. Those of us who do what I do and what Allie does, and maybe even what some of you do, I don't know what you do, but most of us who are doing this, it's because we really, really want to help. We spend our days and nights thinking about how we can help harder and better. So I loved this quote, don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. Always think about, what is it that I can do? I'm working with a student right now, 23, autism spectrum. I've been working with him for 2 years. We're back up against a wall, and I met with him last week, and I said, I want you to put down 10 things you like about yourself and that you can do. And he's got some challenges, and he's going to have lifelong challenges. And instead of everybody saying, well, you know what, this isn't something you did right, and no, you're not doing this, you're not going to your, work program, and you're on your computer all day, let's focus on what is it you can do, because that's what I want to know. I want to know where we're going next. So hopefully that can inspire you to feel better, especially even with a sibling and yourself, that there's a lot you can do, even if you're feeling that trauma that's beneath it all. And that's it. Thank you so much, and I welcome all the conversation we could have. Thank you. Anybody have any comments, questions, sharing? Yeah.
I just think that list of things that you can do and
Okay, chocolate should go on the list. Okay. What was it? Chocolate cake and what? And red wine. Okay. Any kind of, okay, yes. There's absolutely a place for red wine especially, right? That's good for our hearts as well. Okay, chocolate and red wine going on the list. Anybody else? Oh, funny.
When you said music club and all this, I really have a music club that I run. It's really fun. It's my best one. It's like, and it's generally usually the second or third month that you have been good, so it's not that.
Great.
And it's called so dinner and movie, and we're in
Awesome.
and then I also do my gym Molly, one of the things that's my hair at night, usually has my food in the morning. So I put on that list, and then I'm also an outsider, and that really helps. I wouldn't realize I didn't have my
That's
license, so I didn't know. And then one last thing.
sure. No, this is great. This is why we have these community opportunities.
Under you have community, I was running an organization, I think we talked about
Yes.
before, called Flow, it's flexible learning opportunities for another support group for parents. But I had to put it on the back burner because I can't manage myself, and I was kind of doing that, and then starting out.
I think with you, but I have used a bunch of those resources.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
Yeah, so the website is still up, but
Yeah.
I need a treasurer, a web person, and once I get those three things, if you don't want to let me know, but I will, when I get the team that I need.
Great.
Now, we're going to rename it and relaunch it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's what it is. We also need having a parent support group one month, and the next month is a speaker or speaker panel.
Right.
Support group,
And you've got a big list of resources too. Aren't you connected to Coalition Connection too? I think they've got a link. There's a link to you on that. It might be the Redwood site. There's a link to you on another website because I found you through like hopping. Yeah. Awesome. Great. Thank you for sharing. That's great. Well, I'm going to mic. Okay.
Cool.
There you go.
Thank you. So I got interested in sib shops about, 6-7 years ago. And my interest in it came from growing up in a house with a brother with special needs. And no one ever talked about it in my house. I knew that my brother had special needs, but he didn't have special enough needs to acknowledge it, right? So he had a sensory processing disorder. He had what probably should have been diagnosed as Asperger's, now high functioning autism, or a social communication disorder. And I grew up going to school with him and watching that, watching him not have friends, watching him be awkward in social situations, not knowing how to support him at school, and feeling this real pull of, I want to be with my friends, and it's really hard to watch my brother. And so I decided, I went to grad school, became a marriage and family therapist, but before I even did that, I was like, I need to support siblings because I never got that growing up, and I think that it is such a missing piece. I also babysat a lot all through high school and college, and always babysat for families with kids with special needs, and watched the sibling dynamics and watched how in all of these families there were commonalities between the siblings, and watched how some families talked about it really openly and some did not, and how this really made a difference. So that's kind of where my passion came from, in wanting to work with the siblings and wanting to talk about it and work with it and connect these kids. So I actually went to Arkansas randomly to do this SibShops training, and got connected with Dawn Meyer, who was running the sibling support network at that time, did the full training, came back, started SibShops here. And I've been running it in Marin since that time. And now I run 2 programs. I have a program for girls, 4th to 8th grade. So those are just for sisters. And the girls really advocated for that. They wanted their own group. They wanted it to be the older girls, and they wanted to meet at night. This was their thing. So that's what we do. We meet on Friday nights, every 6 to 8 weeks. And then I have another group that I run that's a co-ed group, and that's 1st grade and up. And it's a really big range. It really goes from 1st to 8th grade, which sounds a little odd when you just hear that age range, but it works. It really, really works. And the kids, the biggest thing that the kids connect with is that they all have siblings with special needs. And the fact that they get together and they get to talk about that is a big deal for them. And they don't seem to care how old the other kids are. That's not what matters to them. It's all of a sudden they have this commonality and they get to talk about it in an open way with kids who actually get it. So when you were talking about attunement earlier, I was thinking about it, and one of the biggest things that they say is, my friends talk about their siblings, and they talk about how they're annoying or they do this thing, but they don't get it. They have no idea. So I can't ever talk about my sibling at school because nobody's going to understand. But when I come here, this is where I get to talk. This is where people get it. So I just feel like it's just such an important place for them to be able to have that and connect. SibShops, though, are not all just about talking about their siblings. SibShops are fun and silly. We play games, we do art projects, we laugh a lot. They meet for 3 hours, so that's why we only meet every 6 to 8 weeks. So the girls come from 5 to 8, the co-ed groups come on Sunday mornings from 9:30 to 12:30. And during that 3-hour time period, it is a mix of, like I said, games, art projects, relay races. Sometimes we'll do themed nights, so I'll do minute to win it things, or scavenger hunts. One day we went outside and we got shower caps and we put shaving creams on their heads and threw Cheetos at each other and tried to stick Cheetos to their heads. So we're silly, we have a lot of fun with it. But we build discussion activities into the day or into the time period that they're there. So they are given plenty of time to talk and process that as well. So I do have some flyers here for you guys if anybody is interested. And we only have a couple more events coming up for this school year. So we just run them throughout the school year, not during the summer. It's just everyone's schedule in the summer is way too sporadic. So I'll hand these out. I was looking at it when I was sitting over there and realizing that for the second girls group, I have the morning time written down, but that's wrong. It actually is the 5 to 8 time. So hopefully you guys can correct that on your own. I'm sorry, I just missed that. So does anyone have any questions about sub shops right now or want any more information? Yeah. For teenagers? Yeah, so I have had interest from some of our kids who have aged sort of into those teen years. What I find is that when I present it to them again in the teen years, they don't actually come to a group. So at that point, typically what they want more is some individual therapy support. So I don't have any teen programs right now, but we definitely do offer the individual therapy support as well. And it can really be focused on the sibling issues. And since, you know, I am trained in the sib shops and also some of the other therapists in our practice are really familiar with the sibling dynamics, we can work with teens. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Oh, participants. Yeah, in the girls program or at a time. Yeah, so usually there can be anywhere between like 4 and 12 kids at a time. That's usually what I can take. Usually we won't do it with less than 4, but maximum of 12. Okay? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
How was the conversation still positive towards the child with special needs?
Sure.
How did it stay positive
For that, for the child with special needs. Right. So I guess it depends on what that child's sort of cognitive abilities are and what their awareness is around their special needs, right? So for some kids who do have awareness around their strengths and challenges, they might be more or less savvy to understand what those conversations are, right? But I would say that for most families, the ones who do it what I saw to be sort of the most positive was the ones who talk about it more on a broad spectrum of like every person has strengths and challenges in their own brains, right? So like, yeah, your sister is really struggling right now. She's got some real struggles with her impulse control. And when her body gets going, it's really hard for her to stop. But I also want to acknowledge that she's got an amazing memory, you know? So we're looking at, she's got these challenges and this is really hard in the family and she has these strengths, okay? So you're acknowledging that these things are happening while also being able to acknowledge that there's some good things happening as well. But then also being able to talk about it just as a general family dynamic, right? So like mom maybe is really good at cooking dinner, but she's a terrible singer, you know? And so when she sings in the car, it's like really disastrous for us. So you can kind of look at it that like every person in the family has some strengths and challenges. And so it's a universal thing, right? But sometimes challenges come out and they affect other people a lot more. And they can be much more disruptive in the household and they can have a much greater consequence to other people. So, yeah. Yes.
With users in mind,
Mm-hmm.
if there were a teenager who expressed their significant something that they wanted to have another teenager
Sure.
who would experience
Yeah.
with confidentiality in mind,
Right.
there would be a way to do that.
Absolutely. So if we ended up having a group of teenagers or several teenagers who were interested in connecting, there are ways to start to connect teens within that context. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
They have a procedure called 5-to-1 and 5
Mm-hmm.
to 1. And that is amazing. It's hard to tell people what that is. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get parents and coaches and teachers and leaders. The 5-to-1 is 5 positive things employees have very well. So when you can see it's not, and that's the goal. That's not what you're going to tell you. You're going to work on saying 5 things and
Mm-hmm.
good about that event and criticism.
Yeah.
But positive personal learning is a lot of good resources for anybody in those as well.
Definitely.
I wanted to ask both of you, have you ever heard of a book called Being the Other One, Growing Up with Brother and Sister of Special Needs? It's an Australian author, and it's on my desk. I've heard of it. Supposedly she's the background would like she's from Australia
Mm-hmm.
and like roots like this and I've been wanting to read it. Alright, you can do this. Yeah.
Yeah. Let us know. Great. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us. This has really been special for me, and I always love coming here to talk at STAR. So thank you all for coming. This is great. Third time's a charm.
I know, right?